We are mildly interesting guys, and we talk about some stuff. So welcome to the podcast, we call it Joel the Podcast. It's Alex and it's Alex, here for Joel the Podcast. I'm Alex.
And I'm Alex.
And this is our podcast, Joel. Is this 41 here?
Sure is.
All right, welcome to episode 41, everyone.
Yep.
Quarantine, whatever number we're on.
5?
I was going to say 4, but it could also be 5.
I don't actually know. Maybe it's 4.
So welcome to Quarantine, whatever, episode 41. We are, excited to be podcasting during this historic time. First off, I wanted to let everyone know that, actually, you know what? Let me let everyone know that we received an email. So why don't you read the email before I say anything?
All right, This won't affect what you're about to say, but our email this week comes into us from Cephalopodmaster once again. Thanks for emailing us, Cephalopodmaster, and
let's give a round of applause to Cephalopodmaster. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Cephalopodmaster. His email is pretty short and to the point. Subject line: I'm a dumbass.
Thank
obviously.
You. That's not obvious, but thank you.
The email is, he says, automaton. Evidence. I know Nathan has one because I played with it when I visited him last time.
All right.
Which I suppose he did.
Did he include his Venmo handle?
Fair enough. He says, instead, to donate the $1 to the podcast Patreon page.
Okay.
Is that possible?
Probably, but let me say this, Cephalopod. I would rather just keep the $1 because it just goes back to me anyway. So if you really want me to donate...
I would propose that it goes back to us anyway.
Sure. Okay, how about even better? I'll Venmo you 50 cents because if I donate it to the Patreon, then Patreon gets some of the money.
Right. So
we're really... I'm proposing to Venmo Nathan 50 cents. Cephalopod, if you have if you really want me to donate it to the Patreon, send us an email and I will do it if you really want me to, but...
Right, but I accept this alternate plan. It seems more reasonable. If for some reason he insists on us donating it to the Patreon instead...
He's secretly the owner of Patreon.
he's the owner of it. It would really be helpful if he would include the Venmo username for Patreon, so that we could just each Venmo them half of whatever it's like 5% or something.
Right.
We could each Venmo them 2 cents.
Right.
So yeah, if for some reason you want us to do that, then email us. I don't know. That seems like
I'm gonna wait until next week, and if we haven't received any, let's say a week from whenever this episode is released,
which is Wednesday, this upcoming Wednesday, which is 4 or 5 days from now. I can't really keep track, but we do record these well ahead of time.
Exactly, we're very prepared. But a week from when the podcast is released, and if I don't have an email by then, I'll just Venmo you 50 cents.
Right. That sounds reasonable to me.
So thank you, Cephalopod, for that email, which leads us into shame on everyone else who did not send us an email. We are really disappointed because, in our last podcast, we pointed out that there's literally no reason for you not to be emailing us. So we're gonna have a brief moment of silence in spite of all the people who didn't email us. And David, you can skip ahead of this moment of silence. Everyone else, you have to listen to it. How long should this one be?
Oh man, what did we do last time? 15 seconds?
I think we did 15, but it might have been 10.
10 or 15. All right. You know what? I am willing to give everyone a reasonable doubt that they just forgot and didn't listen to the episode yet.
Okay, I guess that's fair.
It's possible, I suppose,
right,
that they just haven't listened yet. And of course, when they do listen, the first thing they would do would be to email us.
Right.
If they listened to that episode and didn't email us, I mean, that's just shameful.
Let me say this. I guess it's possible where someone is listening to this podcast, then they're like, I would email them, but I don't really have anything to say. All right, listen up here. Email us anyway. Put anything you want. Put a copy pasta in the email. Put a meme in the email.
Right.
Tell us about your day. It doesn't matter what's in the emails. Just send us an email.
Yeah. Any sort of interaction or genuine human connection we can get is appreciated.
Right. What we're saying is
times.
We have no friends and we want you to be our friend.
Right. So if you think you are my friend or Alex's friend or both, and you didn't email us, then that's just you saying that you're not actually our friend. So
it's all on you.
Right.
So you want to
as for how long this pause should be, I'm going to start writing an email once we pause, and until I send the email, we're just not going to say anything. How about that?
Okay. Are you going to say what the email is, or is it just going to be a mystery? You
mean like afterwards? Like, am I?
Or
I
now?
Don't understand.
Either one.
In advance? I have no idea what it's going to say.
I'm basically saying who are you writing to? Whom are you writing this email, and what's going to be in it? But I'm thinking that maybe you didn't want to say that beforehand. So.
Oh no, I didn't have like a joke planned. I was just.
Okay, you're just going to write a random email.
I'm just going to write an email. I'm going to write it with my email account, and I'm going to send it to the podcast.
I got it. All right.
That way, it's on record. If in the future we get some emails and we feel like sharing some exclusive content, we can find out what it is that I wrote in this email.
So we're not going to share it to this episode.
I don't think so. They haven't earned it yet.
Exactly.
Except for Cephalopod. If Cephalopod Master emails us, I will forward him the email that I wrote.
Right. If anyone else, email us and we'll read it on the next podcast.
Right.
Otherwise, you'll never get to know. All right, here we go. Starting now.
All right. The message has been sent.
All right.
So we have experimental evidence that pause was long enough for everyone to have written their own brief, not premeditated email.
Right. And if you need more time, just pause the podcast.
Yeah.
Also, if anyone skipped through that pause, shame on you. Go back and listen to it.
You have to. It's not fair otherwise to everyone else who listens like a good listener. It's in the rules of the podcast. If you don't know the rules of the podcast, you clearly haven't been listening to the podcast enough.
If you don't know the rules of the podcast, email us and we'll tell you the rules.
Yes. There you go. That's a good. So first of all, if you don't know what to email us, I don't know how that's possible because every episode we tell you at least one reason to email us.
Exactly.
Second of all, that's a really good and easy one that you could easily you could easily write in your moment of silence back there. What are the rules of the podcast? So if you actually listened to the moment of silence and didn't know what to write and you were like, "Wow, this is a dumb joke." Go back and listen to the moment of silence again, and this time write us an email that says, "What are the rules of the podcast?" and send that to us.
This is really low-hanging fruit here, guys. That we can't make it any easier for you.
If you listen to this episode and don't email us, what are the rules?
We have no threats because we have no power over you, but
right. If we did, oh man,
we would exercise it. You can be sure.
Keep that in mind as you don't email us.
All right, so I guess we should start the podcast now.
Yeah.
I just wanted to announce that neither of us owes the other $1.
Well, I disagree with that, but
well, that's noted, but still not true. Also, there's no sports still. The NFL draft is coming up, so we'll have something in a week or two, whenever that is. But they've been showing a lot of, like reruns and stuff, like of old games on TV. So, yeah, it was yesterday. My dad was switching between the 2016 NBA Finals and what was the other one? Oh, it was football. Some kind of, I don't even, actually maybe it wasn't football. He was switching between two sports that were like in the championship. It's like one other time you get to see that, so. All right.
What strange and wonderful times we're in where you can watch reruns of two different sports championships at the same time.
Yes. So, great. All right. So now that the intro's out of the way, start thinking about an Olive Garden quote because you never remember until the very end.
Thanks for that. I've actually got a note here because as one of our listeners actually emails us things and communicates with us sometimes, I have a suggestion from him about what our Olive Garden quote should be.
Okay, great. So we'll get to that at the end, but for now, let's go to Ask Reddit and answer some questions because nobody emailed us ideas of what we could do.
Right. Not that we depend on emails to tell us what to do.
We definitely can do whatever we want and have a lot of our own content, but, while that is true, we also have no ideas and depend entirely on suggestions for content. So,
yeah, in a much more real way,
right?
We need you to email us, or the podcast is going to be kind of bad.
Right. So, if this episode is bad, it's your fault, listener. All right.
Way to go.
Here's the first question. This may not, I don't have an answer to this question. I just wanted to curious if you do, but if you don't, we can move on. Coders of Reddit. How do you politely refuse your friend's $1 million app idea? So what this is referring to, and you can tell me if you've experienced this, is that when people find out you're a coder, they'll say, "Oh, I have this great idea for an app, and I want to code it. And I want you to code it," because, they obviously don't know anything about coding. And they suggest some like 50-50 split because they're the ideas man and you're the implementation guy. So, have you ever experienced anything like that?
No, that has never actually happened to me. I think the closest I can relate to that concept is when I come up with a great idea, and then have to do it myself.
Right.
Except typically I don't end up doing it myself.
Yeah. Speaking of which,
sort of reasonable time frame.
What's the status of the catapult?
I recently 3D printed a couple of new parts for it. It's actually really
Nice.
interesting. I can show you, and this is going to be very bad podcast content, but you're going to
Well,
find it interesting.
it's the listener's fault, so
Right. In
let's
fact,
see
to
it.
do this, I have to walk away from the microphone. So this part might I'm going to come back, but this maybe I just won't talk for a minute here so that the sound quality doesn't suffer. So you talk for a bit, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
It's not going to look to you like I'm going anywhere, but until the microphone is back in the picture, I'm not going to talk.
Okay.
It's all very important information for the listeners to know. So
Exactly.
now you're all informed. This is why Alex is talking for a minute here.
Right, except that I keep trying to talk, but you keep talking. So anyway, I was looking at some of the other answers that other people gave on this question. And somebody answered, I asked them to watch How to Build an App, a series by Tom Scott. It starts out with, if you think you want to build an app, you shouldn't. It continues in this vein while showing you exactly how to do it. So I just thought that was funny.
Tom Scott is a very good YouTuber.
Well, that was fast.
Well, yeah, it was on the other side of my desk. I just had to walk around my desk. All right, so here's the newest bits of my let's see. You can
The
see this
listeners,
here.
they're gears, basically.
Right. So the idea is I've got a bunch of these motors, but maybe none of them within arm's reach, which is a real shame.
That's fine. I know what a motor looks like.
Right. Well, the idea is this gear would like stick onto the shaft of a motor,
Right.
and then mesh with this gear. You can
Is that to draw it back?
No, that's actually to rotate it side to side so that it
Oh, I
can
see.
aim at things.
Got it.
But this construction here is actually really interesting. Our listeners will note that there are a handful of different pieces all assembled here. I'm going to take them apart to show you just how clever I am at designing all of this stuff. So there's a screw, which is what held the large gear in place. That was in here.
Uh-huh.
And if you lift the large gear off the plate, you can see there's a bunch of ball bearings in there.
Right.
So I actually printed some channels for the bearings into each of these parts
Nice.
and kind of incorporated a bearing into my structure.
Did you just have ball bearings lying around?
I purchased some ball bearings for this purpose,
So, okay, so for the listeners, he's been working
continuing
on...
to demonstrate my commitment to this project that I started.
Right. So he's
5
been working
years
on
ago.
this project for 5 years?
5 years.
I was going to
Well-
say 3 years.
Maybe it was only 3.
The first time I remember seeing this project was junior year. I mean, sorry,
Okay.
sophomore year, when you were in
Sophomore
Hillenbrand.
year. Let's see, because when it really properly started. Keep in mind, it's been like a year since we graduated.
Right.
So there's that year, senior
Right, so-
year, junior year, sophomore year, 4 years. Yeah, split the difference. It's probably been about 4 years that I've been actually working on this.
So he's been working on this project for 4 years. I've now stated, probably after 2 years or so, I said, I don't think you're ever going to finish this project.
Right.
But the project is to make a catapult that will launch things to you.
Specifically Reese's peanut butter cups, which I had a large stock of, and then I ate all of them. So
Right.
eventually
So,
I'll have to buy some more Reese's.
right. But
if you wanna help out this project, listeners, it's a really cool project. I think you should help out. I think the best way to do it would be to send me more Reese's because I am now out of them.
and the second best way to do it would be to send us an email encouraging him to finish the project.
Yes, for every email we get that mentions this project, I will dedicate 1 hour of my time to working on it. So
I assume it has to be
no more.
I
will
assume it has-
never- What?
I assume it has to be individual senders, right? Like someone can't just set up a script to email you 1,000 times.
Yeah, that might be bad. I might, if somebody did that, like I would finish the project and then there would be a bunch more emails that went unrewarded. Whereas if it's individual senders, we're only ever going to get one. And so at most, I'll have to work on this for 1 hour. That's right, listeners that aren't David. I have zero faith in you. Absolutely none.
With good reason.
With good reason. Actually, maybe 2. Ben has emailed us in the past. Maybe he'll email
Yeah.
us again. Who knows?
He's pretty far behind from what he's told me. So.
Gotcha. Well, let's say absolute worst case 2.
Right.
More likely than not, just the 1.
Regardless, so you've machined parts for this project. You've 3D printed parts for this project. It's been 4 years. How much money would you say you've spent on this project so far? Probably not that much, right?
Well, you would think that. So let's back up a little bit. In terms of like building the actual catapult and like purchasing bits for it, I don't think it's fair to count the entire price of the 3D printer.
Right. No, I agree.
The project. That's clearly nonsense. But in terms of 3D printed parts, let's be very generous and say I've printed $5 worth of parts.
Okay.
For all of the metal and plastic and screws and such that I have, I remember spending on the order of $5 to buy the scrap.
Sure.
So that brings us up to $10. All of the various more advanced parts that I have, such as an air compressor and the gearbox that is the release. Once you've cranked it back, you've got to release it, and I've got a mechanism to shift. Those were all either gifts or acquired with permission from my high school robotics team, so no cost there. We're still at $10. And then I spent $300 on a robotic arm, which is intended to load the Reese's into the catapult basket.
I did not know about that, but I have to tell you, there are certainly much better ways you could have done than a robotic arm.
How cool is it to have a robotic arm, though?
I'll
tell you how cool it is. It's super cool. It's been out of the box like once 4 years ago, and it's still probably like the second or third coolest thing I own. Just in that like 10 minutes alone.
I agree that it's pretty cool, but I don't know that I would have spent $300 on it, especially when there's no guarantee that the project will ever be finished.
Well, that's the thing, right? I spent the money on it, and then I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I know, I'll build this catapult, and it'll interface with that.
So that's what inspired the...
That's what... So,
okay, I see.
Right. Which is... I think it's a sensible way to do projects. You get a cool thing, and then you think, what could I do with this? And then you spend the next 4 years very slowly making progress, but I've learned a lot along the way. And that's what it's all about.
Right. Well, I think it's really about having fun, but I assume you've also done that, so...
Yeah. I had fun. I had fun doing this. This was pretty fun.
Right. I think that's the real reason you continue with the project.
Yes, I think you're right.
So, great. All right.
That was interesting.
Now that we didn't answer that question, let's go to the next one. Again, I couldn't think of an answer off the top of my head, but what is something that about yourself that sounds totally made up, but is 100% real?
I don't think most of our listeners will know this about me. I may have mentioned it before. I probably did, because it's one of those like fun facts that you tell people when you can. But in high school, I got paid several $1,000s by a company to teach a robot to play tic-tac-toe.
Nice, yeah.
I don't think there are any other things about me that are like so ridiculously absurd that you wouldn't believe them. That's
Yeah.
probably the strangest.
I'm trying to think about myself. Maybe the strangest thing about me is that I've never had any injury that required me to go to the hospital. I've been to the hospital, injury or illness. Like, I guess that's not really that unusual. I guess most people. Well, actually, maybe not. I'd be curious to know how common that is.
Right. In our sample size of 50% of us can say that.
Right, and I know
So-
you've had multiple
Right.
hospital needing injuries. So
Yeah. Plenty for
I-
both of us.
if you are alive, email us and let us know whether you've ever had any injuries or illnesses that required you to be in the hospital.
Feel free to leave out all of the personal details.
Right, just say
that
I've
might
been
be
to the
kinda-
hospital or
Right.
not.
Yep.
To be clear, I have been to the hospital for to visit to visit other people.
I've been to a hospital before.
Right, and
In
obviously I
fact,
was
you were probably born in a hospital.
right. I was born
So-
in a hospital, so
Being in a hospital was the first thing you ever did.
yeah. Here's a random question: have you lived in the same house your whole life? Like you grew up in the same house and never moved?
Nope. I lived for 10 years in the house I like originally grew up in, and then we moved to a different house, which is the house my parents currently live in. And they've been there for 13 years now. Obviously, I lived in a handful
Right.
of different places in college. I assume you're ignoring that,
Yeah, I mean,
as well as
I just
I
meant
currently no longer live
right.
there. But
I just meant growing up, but yeah.
right.
So
Nope, we lived in two distinct houses.
yeah, I did. I have two, except that I only lived in the first one for 9 months.
Hmm.
So
So very close, but
I've effectively lived in the same house, grew up in the
Right.
same house my entire childhood / teenage years.
yeah, as far as you know. Yeah. Nope, I was definitely old enough to like have memories of the other house. So,
Nice. All right. Great. What is the next one? Let's see. Let's scroll through some here. What is something that has aged well?
I think the Christopher Nolan Batman movies have aged well. I recently watched Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. I feel like we've talked about this pretty recently on
did.
the podcast.
We did with Shelby.
Right.
I
That's the first thing that came to mind.
I agree, but I don't really know that those movies are old enough to really say they aged well as a meaningful thing yet.
Remember those movies from like 10 years ago? They really aged well.
I guess it was over 10 years ago that Batman Begins came out, probably like 12
Right.
or 13 years ago. I think I was going to say CGI from the early 2000s has aged pretty well in my opinion. Like obviously it's not great, but like
Yeah.
Star Wars prequels, you know, love them or hate them, I think the CGI is actually pretty good in those. And
Yeah, for sure.
Last night watched the first Harry Potter movie, which came out in 2001, and I think the CGI in that is pretty decent as well. So, I would say that's one thing. Obviously, we could say various movies like The Matrix or whatever, but I'm wondering if there's other things that have also aged well.
The word cool has aged well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
There's been lots of other words that come and go, right? But I don't remember a time when cool wasn't cool. So,
Right, and I think it's probably been cool since we were born,
yeah,
at least.
it's a good one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of music that has aged well.
Indeed. Yep.
Yeah.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean,
Lot of
you can pick any time period really. There's music from that time that has aged well.
there's people that have aged well. Like
Me.
yeah. I was thinking more of someone who was older.
Yeah. Well, that's fair.
Like Keanu Reeves has aged well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So yeah, what as a corollary, what has not aged well?
Um, Pretty much any of those other words that I was thinking of but never really mentioned
Far out.
yeah. Um,
I think 90s hairstyles and glasses have not aged well,
oh yeah, like the
or
a
any
lot of those
years
styles of sunglasses that are very like small and round.
right, or the ones that are like big with like that have thin rims. Like we have
Yeah.
bigger glasses today, but they tend to be more squarish and have thicker rims. Like the ones
Like
like
this
if
kind of. I mean,
yeah,
you can get bigger and thicker, obviously, but
right. But I'm more thinking of like, have you ever seen the movie it's Office Space, or it's the, do you know what I'm talking about? Maybe you haven't
I
seen
know
it.
what you're talking about, but I haven't seen it.
There's like a meme with a guy who's like, it's like the, yeah, if we could do blah blah blah, that would be great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the glasses that guy has are the kind of the ones
Didn't
I'm
age
talking
well.
about. Yeah.
Right. All of those like brown and tan colors from the 70s didn't really age that well.
Any any movie or really any entertainment that involves like that centers around the technology of the day has really not aged very well.
Yep. Lots of my milk doesn't age well.
Milk does not age well at
Right.
all.
Right.
But I used the last of my milk before I left for the pandemic. So fortunately, my milk hasn't gone bad, but probably most of the other things in my refrigerator have by now.
Yeah, that's a shame. I don't have very much in my refrigerator now. I meant to bring this up when we weren't podcasting. Not that it matters. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. Saturday. It was this Saturday, which is obviously either today or yesterday, based on whatever number I said at the beginning of the podcast about how many days in advance we're doing this.
You said 5, so I think Saturday's tomorrow.
Saturday's tomorrow. Well, so hypothetically tomorrow, I'm planning to go to the grocery store. And I'm going to try and do it at like off-peak times, but I'm not really going to like want to get up that early. So it's going to turn out that I end up, by the time I get there, it's like 11. So
right. At least you embrace that.
Yeah, clearly not like, not what I hoped for, but I figure, you know what, whatever. It's the pandemic. Surely the store's not going to be that crowded. But it's busier than I've ever seen it.
Right.
Like pandemic or no. And I really just wasn't feeling it. So I turned around and came home.
Nice.
I wasn't in desperate need of groceries. I just kind of mostly needed groceries.
And when you say you needed groceries, you mean tomorrow you will need groceries, and you will turn around and leave when you see how busy it is.
Yeah, no, these are I may have said those things as if they had already happened, but I'm describing to you what I think is going to go down tomorrow, Saturday.
Today,
and here's the thing: by Tuesday, for example, I'm gonna be down to like a couple of pork chops that I had in the freezer, and my last bit of pasta, and then a bunch of snack type stuff.
Right.
So on Saturday, once I realized that going to the grocery store, maybe not the best idea. Sure, I'm sure it would have been fine, but like I just didn't want to risk it, At that point, I'll come home and think, man, I can't just not get food. What am I going to do? So what I'll do, I assume, is order groceries online and schedule them for pickup. Unfortunately, the soonest I can pick them up is Thursday, this upcoming Thursday.
Right. In
several days, not just one or two.
Right. I'm sure you'll survive those 2 days.
Right.
I mean, 6 days.
Definitely 6 days. In fact, I'll probably over the weekend order a pizza or something just to ease the burden of, not having that much food. And I mean, like, let's be honest. I do have if it really came down to it, I'd be fine for another week at least, because I've got plenty of canned soup. It's the sort of soup that you would like put in the pot and then fill the can up again with my preferred. I prefer to fill it up with milk so that the soup is creamier.
Right.
But I could obviously also fill it up with water. In my opinion, that wouldn't be as good. So like if I'm trouble
in the podcast and I'm bored listening to this.
Yeah. It's a really bad one. I feel, would it be better to just not post one this week?
No, I think we should post it, and if people hate it, they can suck it because they didn't email us.
In fact, I was making it boring on purpose.
Yeah, so one thing we can discuss right now, speaking of things that we meant to discuss on the podcast, was before the podcast, we were talking about ways that the Democrats could pick their nominee next time around, since Bernie Sanders recently dropped out.
Right. So we're clearly down to one. And let me tell you, this is we were using questions from Reddit earlier, and Reddit is what inspired this conversation. It's not inherently political, I think. So like if you're listening to this podcast to get our political opinions, then please email us, because we could easily make it about that. But as of now, we've been not doing that. So
we've been avoiding it.
Right. In fact, if you emailed us and told us that you really wanted to hear us talk about politics, I'd still not really want to do it, despite directly hearing from someone that they were...
We would consider just recording a private conversation and emailing it back to you.
Right.
Rather than posting it, but...
or alternatively, making a political podcast, but making it purely just jokes and...
satirical.
Right. Although in this climate, who knows, am I right? You could have the craziest opinions and...
Anyway, so we were discussing humorous ways in which the Democrats could pick their nominee other than elections. Right. And I think I suggested that they could hold a raffle, and the winner of the raffle picks a nominee. And I think you suggested a similar, like a lottery, where everybody just goes into a, like a big bingo thing or like a lottery thing their name's on a ball, and then whatever ball comes out, that's the nominee. But, elections are overrated. Can you think of any other good ways for them to pick a nominee?
I think they should pick the oldest one.
The oldest person who wants it, or just the oldest person?
The oldest person they can find, Democrat or not. So that way, if they're no good, they'll be gone soon. It won't matter.
And then they just hold elections for the vice president.
There you go. You pick the oldest person, and everybody. No, that's totally not true. Everybody at some point is the youngest person, but not everybody is the oldest person.
They should.
So not everybody will get their turn.
So
here's my new idea.
Okay.
We're gonna have to assume that there is one Democratic president. In fact, we can use Obama.
Right.
The next Democratic nominee is whoever Obama wants it to be. He just picks somebody.
Okay.
Could be anybody.
Right.
And then that person, win or lose, gets to pick the next one. But it can't have been anybody that has been picked before, including themselves.
Including when they're an incumbent, right? Or not?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Would that be better or worse? You think? I am of the opinion.
I don't really think that this. I was just going to say that I don't really think that this method will result in a much different process than just the Democratic National Committee like voting on someone.
Okay, so that's our benchmark is how.
Right. I'm saying this has got to be something very dumb like
Okay.
they like I had an idea a minute ago but I forgot it.
So yeah, obviously
they randomly select letters and spell out names, and the first person's name who actually has the name of something they spell gets the nomination. If there's multiple people, you can just randomly choose one of them or something.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting. So like if you had Scrabble tiles, for example, and you drew them out of the bag, and like let's say for instance the first letter you draw out is an A, then anyone whose name doesn't start with A is eliminated.
Exactly.
And then next you'll draw out an L, and then anybody whose name doesn't start with AL is eliminated, and so
exactly. And actually, you made it a little bit better by mentioning Scrabble, because Scrabble has tiles that are more distributed to common letters, so you would be more likely to get something coherent rather than QXD EAF or something like that.
I wonder if that system was implemented, if you might start seeing people get named stranger things to try and.
Well, if it depends upon if we actually implement it with Scrabble tiles or not, because probably not either way. If you implement it with Scrabble tiles, right, then you want to have more vowels and common letters in your name. But if you just implement each letter has an equal chance, then there's no advantage to picking any particular name.
So what if
actually you're an advantage if your name is like AA or like just one letter first and last name.
When would they stop? When they reached an exact match?
Right, that's what I was thinking. But maybe there would have to be like a minimum length requirement. You must have 3 letters in your first and last name each or something like that.
Yeah, you'd almost have to have something like that. Otherwise, you'd just get a bunch of people naming their kids one-letter names. And then everyone else at that point would be kind of locked out of contention.
Right.
Like if you named your kid John and somebody else named their kid Jay, you'd never, it's impossible.
Right.
So this seems like a very good plan, obviously, because it rewards people whose parents think ahead. And those are the kind of people we want in office.
I have an idea to top it. So right now, I'm looking at this foosball table. Okay. I think there should be a giant, like 32 round or 20 round. You wouldn't have to have an absurd number of rounds of a foosball tournament in order to have a winner. The only issue is, actually the first round would have millions of games in it, and it'd be difficult to actually play millions of games that are officiated properly. But regardless of how, you might have to start 4 years in advance or even more.
That's the good thing is we've got whatever we come up with, we've got 4 years to actually do it.
Right, so just a giant foosball tournament bracket, single elimination to pick the winner.
I think there should be a penny that's designated to be the election penny or something like that. Probably would have a cleverer name.
Right. I
But
guess
you
you're gonna
would-
get. I guess you're gonna get that phone ringing in the podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can hear that pretty clearly, so I'm sure your recording is picking that up as well.
Yep. Anyway, say what you were gonna say.
Right. So there's a penny, and everybody just for 4 years just spends money, keeps money, does whatever they're gonna do with money, and then at the end of the 4 years, everybody turns in all of their pennies, and whoever had the penny is the nominee.
So
And then the mint can re-release a new penny secretly somewhere to kick off the cycle.
So there is a flaw with that, which is that rich people would have a distinct advantage because they could just hoard as many pennies as they could get their hands on, whereas people who are poorer really don't have the luxury of just hoarding pennies. They kind of need to spend most, if not all, of their money.
Right. It is the fairest monetary acquiring system I can think of, though, because everybody can afford to hold on to a penny. But you're definitely right that rich people have an advantage. And clearly any system where rich people have an advantage is no good. So
I think any system in which any non-absurd group of people have an advantage is no good.
All right.
When I say not absurd group, I mean like my name system probably gives an advantage to people with shorter names.
Right.
But I consider that somewhat of an absurd group of people. Like it's not like an actual group that has anything in common.
What if everybody who wanted to be the Democratic nominee came up with one of those chain emails where when you get it, you're supposed to forward it to like 5 people or 10 people or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And whoever could get the most people involved in their chain was the nominee.
So that's an interesting idea.
It feels a little bit like voting, so I'm not
that's
sure
what I was
that
going to
like
say.
that.
That was my second question. It's like voting. My first question would be, how would you count that?
Obviously, it would be self-reported. I would think.
So then it's just voting, because anyone can report that they did or did not receive the email.
Right. You just you'd go and you'd fill out your ballot to say which email you got, and forward it on, and then.
Except that you could vote for multiple people if you wanted. That would be the only difference.
You could. In fact, maybe you could forward the email to a different number of people to increase or decrease their chances, and that number in some way indicated your ranked choice of a vote.
It's just like voting, but with extra steps. That's an interesting idea. What if it's just a giant foot race?
That would be interesting. Would you be allowed to cheat in the foot race?
Well, first of all, if you're allowed to do it, it's not cheating.
Okay.
But I assume you mean like physically attack people.
Would there be any rules during the race?
There would certainly be rules. But I'm wondering...
All right, let's come up with what the rules should be to make the race most fair, because otherwise I feel like you're selecting for a fit, young-ish male.
Right, so what if... Okay, so here's what it is. The distance you have to travel is dependent upon a bunch of factors, like your age, gender, and... I guess that would be the two main factors, but you could factor in various things.
So what we should do is time everybody running a mile, and then use those times to scale the distance they have to run, and whoever runs their distance quickest.
See, you can't do that, because then people would purposely go very slowly the first time.
What if the goal was to get as close to your pace as possible?
As close to the same time?
Yeah.
as the time before. I feel like there would be just too many people who got close. Who got like the exact time as they did before.
Yeah, fair enough, but like the Scrabble tile name thing, you're going to end up with ties all the time.
That's true. All right, so what's a good way to break the tie in that case?
Yeah, these are some good ways I think to like narrow down a selection.
What if it's
candidates.
okay? Here's what it is. It's like what we just said, except it's a it's not a short race. It's not just a mile. It's got to be like like a marathon or something. You may have to take breaks and walk most of it, but I would say, and it might even take you several days. But the fact that it's so long means it's very difficult. No, that would make it easier. See, the thing is, no matter what, you can just start timing yourself, walk to the end, and then just wait for a specific time, and then cross the finish line.
Right.
It's too easy to game this one. All right, foot race is a bad idea.
Right. Clearly, we shouldn't select our presidential candidates this way.
Okay, what if it's This is it. It's a giant game of musical chairs.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So there's just millions of people walking around a circle, and there's one fewer than that chairs. And obviously, this game will have to take place over many months.
Right.
But
can you imagine playing a game that big? Like at some point, you'd end up with one empty chair somewhere, and two people. Probably not that close to that
probably
chair.
Like miles away from the chair.
Frantically running along the line of chairs trying to find the chair.
The first like several million rounds would probably take like days to complete.
So maybe there should be more than one person eliminated per round.
Maybe it shouldn't be just one big game. It should be a bunch of smaller games, and when when there's like a winner, they go into another game. So it's like
a musical chairs tournament. You have to advance through several rounds.
Yeah, it's like a poker tournament. So you start at one table, and then when you win at that table, you move to the next table, and so on.
Right.
I feel like
I think
in that case,
you and your vice president should have to play some sort of game together where one of you is blindfolded and doing some sort of action, and the other one is shouting instructions.
That's a good one.
A reasonable distance away. How about this? 1-on-1 basketball. Both players are blindfolded, and there are two people off the court giving them instructions.
I just think that, I was going to say taller people would have too much of an advantage.
Would they, though?
That's what I was like, wait, maybe they wouldn't. I wonder, so the thing is, this is obvious, so no matter what we choose, if there's any skill or talent involved, people are going to be practicing this their whole lives, right?
Right.
So I'm wondering if you blindfolded yourself, like in this scenario, one person blindfolded, the other person giving instructions, would you be able to get really good at that, such that like it's just back to being basketball skill? Or,
I think so, because take an NBA player for example.
Right. Sure.
If you can get like Steph Curry to the corner and just say, all right, you're there, take a three. As long as he's facing the right way, he's got much better odds of making it than I do, for example.
But it's not a simple job to get him to the... So the thing is, if you could get him to the exact spot, you're right, he probably could make a decent number of shots. Mm-hmm. But he can't see. So, right. And if you take too long getting him to the exact spot, the ball could be stolen or he could be, blocked or whatever. Like, you want to get there before the defender has a chance.
True.
So, it might not be as easy as, this is a good idea.
I'd really like to do this. So, if there are two other people who would be interested in facing off against me and Alex in blindfolded remote basketball, Or some, I mean, pick your favorite sport. I think this would be really entertaining for most things.
Well, most sports you can't actually play with just one-on-one.
True, yeah. Yeah, basketball is probably pretty good for this.
Yeah.
I chose it sort of at random, but it turns out it was a good one.
Right. I do think that there would be, like, it would be much harder for old people to win, especially if younger people are training for this. So you would skew to younger, more athletic people, probably skew towards men. So, okay, so here,
maybe
let me ask you
in some slight way, but yeah, I think the things that would give you those natural advantages, you'll have a much harder time taking advantage of.
Let me ask you this. Would the instruction giver be the presidential candidate, or the basketball player be the presidential candidate, and the other one would be the vice presidential candidate?
That's a good idea. So for some reason, initially I was thinking that the instruction giver was the vice president, but there's no real basis for that. Obviously, whatever it is, it should be consistent for everyone.
The thing is, there's no real qualifications for the instruction giver. Like, all you have to do is be able to speak and have practiced this.
Right. So you think the blindfolded basketball player is more impressive than somebody who can effectively communicate with...
Well, here's the thing. I actually think the fact that there's no real qualifications means that should be the presidential candidate, because then there's no skew towards any particular group of people. So anyone who's practiced this and is good at it can have a chance at being president.
If you happen to have a friend who's really good at blindfolded basketball, you may have an advantage, but...
Yeah, but the thing is, if we instituted this system, it wouldn't be you would just be entering this with your friend. You'd be, teaming up with a good basketball player. Like, it would be politicians teaming up with good basketball players.
So, you think the current politicians would, like, manage to recruit NBA players or something like that to be their blindfolded basketball
I don't know
player?
If current politicians would adapt, but it would end up being like that, where
whoever could team up with the actual basketball players would be...
The instruction givers would all just end up being politicians, because once they win the nomination, they have to actually be in an election.
Yeah, I mean, this is for a nomination, I suppose, not the general election. Maybe we're thinking too small. Maybe this is how we should elect our president, not just select a candidate.
The thing is, never mind. I was just going to say that this is more realistic because there's no laws about this, but that's obviously not realistic.
No, I'm starting to really like this one, though, because you've got to... First of all, you've got to be a good communicator. That's obviously a plus. Second of all, you've got to have a friend that's pretty good at basketball.
Right. Well,
that one speaks for itself. That's obviously a good presidential quality.
They probably wouldn't have to be your friend.
They're going to be the vice president, so hopefully you at least get along.
Right, but there's a difference between that and, it's not like... all I'm saying is you're not, like, calling up your friend who's good at basketball and being like, hey, you want to, try to run for president with me? You're going to be... There would probably be some much more, like, professional politicians would have some way of selecting, basically professional blindfolded basketball players. But...
So they'd still raise money for their campaign so they could hire the best blindfolded basketball player they could find, and then...
See, the thing is, I don't know that you would have to hire them. I wonder if you would. I wonder what kind of system would develop. Like, would basketball players want to be vice president enough to just, want to team up with the person without having to be paid, or would you have to, hire, people to do this for you?
I think when the system started out, you would get all of the professional basketball players charging money to be the person.
I lost you. Good thing the recording's just on my end. Let's see.
Yeah, but now there's this...
Oh, I see you now.
We're good?
I hear you now.
All right. all of our listeners are going to experience that seamlessly, but to us it was a mess.
Okay, so
Just
what you
gotta
were saying
trust us.
was
I was saying that
when the system started.
when the system starts, I think professional basketball players are going to be able to charge for their existing basketball talent, whether or not that translates to blindfolded basketball. And furthermore, I think there are going to be people willing to pay them. So I think that system will
Exist. So
exist.
here's the thing. Here's the thing that I'm wondering is what, how many professional basketball players are really going to be interested in doing this? Because professional basketball players make more money than the vice president.
Right.
So, and it's a lot less stressful being a basketball player than the vice president.
Right.
So I'm wondering, like, I like at least the big name players. I suspect they would just not do it. Now you would definitely get, people. There would be some. You're definitely right. There would be some professional basketball players who would,
Yeah.
for millions of dollars, agree to do that. I wonder if maybe they would pass a rule saying you can't pay the person. So that would probably be better. They should do that.
I don't know. Should they? Why?
Why should they? Excellent question. I feel like it's more of a fair and organic process if the person doing it actually wants to be vice president rather than they are just being paid to do it.
Here's a thought. This is kind of crazy, so maybe we can just disregard this immediately.
This is kind of crazy in our system of the. All right, just go ahead.
So you get together a team of 2 people,
Right.
but then once you get to the event, the referee picks which one of you does which task,
Or it's randomly picked.
or it's randomly picked. So you designate as a constant which one of you is the president, which one of you is the vice president, but it's not necessarily a guarantee that one of you or the other is going to be the basketball player versus the instruction giver.
I have something crazier. What if instead of it being this competition, nobody knows what the competition is? There's like a list of many different kinds of competitions it could be.
Okay.
So it could be like a game of Jeopardy, it could be like a game of cards, it could be this basketball thing, it could be a race, it could be any number of it could be a spelling bee, a wide range of possibilities.
I like that you interrupted your thought there just to add in the fact that it could be a spelling bee.
That was the first one I thought of, and I just hadn't mentioned it. But
it's a quality addition to the list. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. But it could be any of a number of things. So when you get there, you say who the president is and who the vice president is, but you don't know what you're actually going to be doing until you get there. And it can change every round. So maybe the first round you have to beat somebody in a race, and the second round you have to play the newlywed game with your partner and beat the other team.
Ah.
So it's just
as a side note, the newlywed game would be a pretty interesting thing for us to do on the podcast. I think we'd be very bad at it.
Okay, we should definitely do that.
All right, we'll do it next week. So,
all right, sounds good.
To make up for the little effort that we put into this one.
Well, this is turning out to be a pretty good episode, I think. So, at least the last 20 minutes or whatever this is. Right. So. Anyway, it's just like there could be thousands of possible games. You have to play in a game of bowling or something.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like it especially that it could change between rounds.
Video games.
Because initially I was thinking they'll announce the competition and then a handful of people, it'll change who, are going to be very well suited for that competition. If it was if it was a Smash Ultimate tournament to determine the winner, there's pretty much a handful of people who are going to be the nominee at that point.
Right.
But if that's just one step in a 30-round single elimination,
exactly,
then
And so I would think that you could actually reduce the logistical burden
Right.
by picking things that are easier to do with millions of people in the first round. So you
Right.
may limit yourself a little bit there. But of course, anyone who wins got to go through all 30 different events, so it's not like you're really limiting anything.
Right. And once you find the winner of that tournament, which would be an excellent thing to watch, by the way. Whoever it was clearly good enough at all of these skills and therefore would make a good president.
And honestly, here's another thing. It would be so entertaining to watch all of this.
It would be so entertaining to be a part of it too. Imagine like the
It'd be
first
so
round or
fun.
two.
Yeah.
You're in it most likely. Like
Right, there's no reason for anybody not to just sign up for it unless it like costs money or something.
yeah. Which it totally shouldn't. I think it would be really
It
fun
shouldn't,
if
but
it
it's
just,
kind of unrealistic because it would cost a lot of money to actually run.
yeah. Unless it was very carefully selected the first few rounds. I feel like the first few rounds would be the difficult part because then you're down to like I don't know, what's the math? You start out with 300 million Americans,
Well, let's say
like
200 million.
Yeah, okay. 200 million are 35 or above. That seems pretty high still. Maybe 150 million. I don't know.
And that they also have to be born in the United States.
Born in the United States. Okay, so let's say at any given time, this is probably a low estimate, but let's for the math it'll be easier. Let's say there's 100 million people who are eligible to be president.
Sure.
They're paired up in teams. So
Right,
there's
so there's
50 million
50 million.
teams.
Sure.
And then I still need a calculator because I don't want to.
Do log base 2 of 50 million? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's somewhat reasonable. Let me just pull up my calculator here.
All right.
See if I can. I want to log. I can't pick the base of this log. All right, let's just
It's
do
log
natural
10
log
then.
and we'll get an estimate.
2.7 is kind of like 2, right?
Probably not for logarithmic purposes. Okay, natural log of 50 million is 17.7. So let's just
All right.
estimate there'll be 20 rounds.
Yeah, that's fair. That's what I was going to guess anyway. I think
Let's see
that's
what-
what we did guess before we started doing any math, right?
Yeah, let's see what 2 to the 20 is to see how close we were. 2 to the 20 is 1 million.
Oh, no.
But you only have to go to like 2 to the 23. Nope, 2 to the 25. 2 to the 26 to get over 50 million. So,
All right, so there's on the order of 26 rounds.
right.
But crucially, what we just learned is that 6 rounds reduces it to 1 million. And another 6 will reduce it to like 20,000.
Which is much more manageable. But
which is
still a
pretty
lot.
manageable.
So I'm thinking, all I want to see is like obviously I would say in the later rounds the games would have to be completely randomly chosen,
Right.
as randomly as possible, and I would say that I really want to see like the final round be just something extremely stupid, like. When my family plays poker, we'll sometimes play a game called One Card on Your Head,
Okay.
which is where you hold a card on your head so you can see everyone else's cards, but you don't know what you have. And so of course
That's
the winner's
interesting.
going to be the person with the highest card. and so you're like betting based on what other people have. You're trying to bluff them into thinking they have low cards. But obviously that wouldn't really work for the game we're talking about, but something as stupid as that is kind of what I'm getting at. I just want to see.
Yeah. Do you think so? Okay. Here's a serious question that is never going to amount to anything, but I do want to think about the what if. Is there a way that for the first that we could come up with like of the 26 tasks we need, that we could come up with like 20 of them that you could do at home, essentially, and then
Well,
create a real game show that did this entire tournament once just to see.
so the thing is, you can't really. If you're saying create a real game show, like we actually do it.
Well, I
Or
mean,
would
not
it-
us, but like some TV network or something.
So here's the thing: if you really wanted to do this as a method of selecting the presidential nominee,
I just,
sorry, I just heard myself. But you wouldn't want to come up with 20 that you could do from home. You would want to come up with like 500 that you could randomly choose 20 from.
okay, that's a good point.
But really, anything involving cards, you can do, because I think it's reasonable to assume that everyone would have a deck of cards, or could acquire one.
Right.
Anything, and that opens up quite a few possibilities. The thing is, if you're forced, you don't have to force everyone to be at home. You just have to force everyone to provide their own materials.
Right.
So, like, you don't have to, like, the issue with being at home is if you're playing a game of a hand of poker or whatever, you can obviously cheat if you're just at home.
Yeah.
But you really don't need everyone to be at home. You just need everyone to come in with their own deck of cards. And you could stagger when they come in, and the first round could be done that way.
Yeah. So
actually,
I really want to see this though. Like I want to see it.
I do too.
I want to be a part of it
Yeah.
for the first like round or two because
Round 18 is just cup stacking.
But the thing, like, what are the odds that the good cup stackers are left? I feel like
Right.
I would have a
Extremely
chance in any
like
individual round.
Right, exactly. That's the thing. This would be so cool.
And then imagine if at the end, like literally anyone could participate in this, but at the end it's a competition between two people. One of them's going to win and have won a tournament of like all of America doing just this string of random stuff, and they won all of it. And then we could like
That's
give them $1
insane.
million prize money or something like that just for fun. But like, how great would that be?
That would be so awesome. If you are the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or a TV network that wants to buy this idea from us, send us an email. We would love to continue to pitch on this.
If there's any entity that I think could pull this off outside of like a government or something, I think it would be Google. And obviously this is going up on YouTube, and somebody at Google has to watch every minute of video that's uploaded to YouTube.
I think that's correct.
Clearly. So
if you're
hey
the
there, Mr.
Hey, Google employee.
or Miss Google employee. I don't want to be don't want to make any assumptions about the Google employee. Please
send us an
please
email.
go to the next. Well, I mean, sure, send us an email. That'd be fun. But go to the next board meeting and bring up our idea. Please make sure to
'Cause-
credit us for it.
Clearly, the person listening to this YouTube video goes to board meetings.
Well, I didn't want to say go tell your boss, because
At
maybe
least
it's maybe
elevate
it's the
this
CEO.
idea up one level, whatever that means.
Right. And if you happen to be the CEO that got assigned randomly to watch this one, first of all, sorry about the first half. The rest of it, we're better than that.
Well, not that much better, but
Not that much better, but clearly this is better than
that's
that.
true.
So
On average, we're better than that.
on
So
man, this is I.
now,
see,
I'm
wouldn't-
upset that this isn't how it works.
It wouldn't be cool unless it was everybody. Like I
Right.
was thinking, like you could get like 10,000 people to participate, and it'd still be a really big tournament of random stuff. But then it's not like it.
It's not 30 rounds. It's what, like it's got to be like 20 round. It's gonna be like not that many rounds.
Yeah,
Actually, that's crazy to think about. We said 25 rounds for 50 million people, and
Right.
10,000 people something like 13 or 14 rounds.
right.
That's
I mean,
insane.
TV executives, this only gets more manageable as it goes along. This is a great idea for a show.
Okay, let me ask you this. Theoretically, obviously we won't actually do this, but how many different competitions do you think you could unique competitions do you think you could come up with? Keeping in mind that every single one has to involve two-person teams.
Right.
So you can modify like you could have chess where they just switch off and they can't talk to each other.
Right. Or so they could. Maybe it's just team chess. They could. Who knows?
Right, but you can modify a lot of games to be two-person teams, but each one has to be a two-person team.
Yeah.
So realistically, how many of those competitions do you think you could come up with?
I think hundreds.
Not you. You and I as a team. How many do you think we could come up with?
I'm really. I can't think of anything that couldn't be adapted into a competition like this.
What about doing your taxes?
I mean, it wouldn't be a very interesting competition, but suppose it would be a competition. And the concept of doing your taxes, like really properly doing your taxes, is kind of just like following instructions and doing simple math. So surely there's a more interesting way that you could use that theme to like maybe you could like come up with a math like a word problem out of a fifth grade textbook.
Right.
You have to solve it really quickly and of course get the right answer.
It's a Rubik's Cube solving competition.
Oh man, I could do well for the first bit, but I don't know how to do the end parts. So
just keep trying until you get it, or until the other team gets it. I
suppose so. I really should learn more things so that when we finally convince somebody to let us do this show, we have an advantage because we are so well learned.
I'm curious how good people would get. Like, obviously, if this were real, people would practice for it. But
I don't know how you would practice for it.
Well, you would just the thing is, you could get by many of the rounds just by being competent in whatever the activity is. So you wouldn't really have to be very good at any of the tasks. You would just have to you would be better than most people if you knew how to do about 70% of the games.
Yeah, there'd be so many cool storylines in this. You'd have the underdogs, and you'd have the people who are like, oh, it's a chess tournament, and there happens to be this great chess player who's left in the round. Clearly, they're the favorites to win it all, but they're playing just some random person. Who knows?
And their teammate is terrible at chess.
And their teammate, maybe they didn't pick a chess playing teammate. Maybe they picked their cousin or something, and it's all.
Imagine the betting that would occur on this event.
Oh man, I don't know how. So, the first couple rounds would be exciting because you'd be a part of it.
Right.
The last couple rounds would be exciting because it would be so intense watching these people that had won all of those rounds against, when you get down to it, literally everyone else.
Right.
You could very easily see yourself being there if you knew how to tie a tie a little bit quicker or something like that. I don't know.
Okay, let me ask you this. How long do you think it would take to run this entire competition?
I think you could pull it off in 6 months.
It's extremely scary to me how realistic this is. Not that it would happen, but that it could happen.
Yeah. You've got once a week, and the first many rounds are lightweight things. I could go to a place once a week and do a thing for an hour to see if I got to move on to the next round or something.
Right. Well,
and then once you got to the more complicated stuff at the end, you could focus all of your resources on that thing, and it could get crazier. It's really cool that this sort of works out. If only somebody could work out the logistics of the whole thing.
I'm just imagining like the organizers getting like sealed packets with instructions and like giant boxes of stuff that's also sealed that you can't open until like the date.
Who would the organizers be in this case?
Well, if we did the nomination, obviously the DNC would, the Democratic Party would be the organizer.
So anybody who's choosing to not run.
Right, you would have to volunteer
Right.
not to run.
Right.
Which I don't think is unreasonable. Like, the thing is, if you're an organizer, you get to see lots of people participating live.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't think you would have a problem getting volunteers to help run it.
Okay.
I think the hardest part would be actually keeping the secret, you know, like making sure no one found out what the competition was beforehand.
Right. Yeah, that would be tough. It'd have to be super.
Like you would basically have to have like a, when I say very small, I mean relatively very small group of people who helped develop what they were and the materials and everything.
Yeah.
They would have to do it in complete secrecy. Like when they ordered, 100,000 ping pong tables, they can't let the manufacturer know that this is for the competition. They have to order like a little bit from various, all from different sources.
Oh man.
It would be extreme. And then they would have to package that all up secretly. None of the people packaging could ever, they would probably have to do the packaging themselves. Like, and then they would have to send them and make sure the people who received them never opened them. And the thing is, if one person opened it or one person told someone what the competition is, the whole thing is voided. It's unless actually, I guess it depends. Probably would just be voided. Like if somebody posted on social media what the competition was.
Yeah, maybe they would have like backups or something in case something got leaked.
They would have to.
Maybe they would just prep like 6 things, and then maybe you could know those 6 things, but you don't know which one. I mean, at that point, realistically, you'd only have that week to prepare.
The other issue is money. Like, obviously, the Democratic Party now has a lot of money because companies, and when people donate to them because they want them to be elected. But in this scenario, no company would actually or person would actually have a vested interest in donating money to the party because, just some random person's going to get nominated that you don't actually have any influence over.
I think I abandoned a while ago the fact that this was for presidential nominations. I just want it to happen in real life now. If it was for the presidential nomination, I think it would be more difficult than if it wasn't.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, you're right. You'd have to have donors who wouldn't be able to, or who shouldn't be able to influence what the games are. Like, can you imagine if there was a company?
Well, the thing is, if you're not doing, you're right. So, I mean, if you're not doing for election or nomination, then it's easy because you just run ads during everything.
Yeah.
Or you can charge like an entrance fee.
I don't think you should charge an entrance fee unless it's like 50 cents, which I guess if it is, you still have $25 million.
I mean, I was thinking it would be like $10. I think most people could afford that.
I think most people could afford that, but I really want it to be like everybody, Like I don't want there to be...
See, the thing is, it really just won't be everybody no matter what. Some people won't have time because they're working. Some people have to watch their kids. It's just unrealistic to think that... And I really don't think charging $10 would really lower the amount very much. I guess maybe it would.
I'm not sure about that, but I guess the way I envision the problem of like people are working, people are taking care of their kids. It's like you'd have like we were saying, like a weekly event, like on Saturday afternoon you go and do something. You like bring your family along or whatever.
What if you're working Saturday afternoon?
Then don't. I never work on Saturday afternoons.
Yeah, lots of people do though.
Why would they? I don't.
Because they have to. Not everyone can just control.
This is my worldview, everybody. I don't have to do it.
I think this is one of.
That,
I think this is unequivocally the greatest idea we've ever had, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that.
I think you're right.
And
it's hard to imagine anything else that this podcast has produced.
No, I don't even mean just this podcast. I mean in our lives. All right, we're way over time, so hit me with the Olive Garden quote.
All right, I'm not going to give any explanation to this on the podcast. I'll tell you what's up later. But emotional discomfort is, in a way, the logical conclusion to the complexity of infinity here in the middle of this Olive Garden.
Nice. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you want this Game Slow / nomination process to be reality, email us and email Google and the DNC and all the various new, TV channels that would run this, and let them know, and make sure you link them to this podcast so they can give us credit and we can get more listeners. Right.
I know this is a lot to ask since you won't even email us, but please email everybody about this.
Exactly. So yeah. All right. If you're still listening now, 86 minutes after we started, thank you. Maybe we'll edit this down, but probably not.
If that beginning chunk can just be cut out seamlessly, I would strongly consider it.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for listening, everybody. I'm Alex.
I'm Alex.
And this has been Joel.